her fingers found the hidden compartment before her eyes did. Chloe was on her knees, reaching deep into the back of her husband's closet to retrieve a heavy winter coat that had slipped off its hanger. The space smelled of cedar, leather, and the familiar, reassuring scent of David's expensive cologne. It was a mundane Saturday afternoon, the kind of quiet weekend day built on ordinary routines, but when her knuckles knocked against a loose wooden panel at the very bottom of the built-in shelving, the sound was hollow. It didn't match the solid structure of the rest of the cabinetry. Curiosity, mild and innocent, made her press harder. The wood shifted with a soft scrape, sliding back to reveal a velvet-lined recess carved into the floorboards. Inside lay a single velvet box, the kind used for high-end jewelry. Chloe opened it, expecting a forgotten anniversary gift or perhaps a surprise for her upcoming birthday. Instead she found a heavy, masculine gold signet ring engraved with initials that weren't her husband's. Sitting right on top of a folded, yellowed piece of paper, she pulled the paper out, her mind still trying to categorize it as something harmless. An old tax document, a property deed from his bachelor days. She unfolded it. It was an official birth certificate from a hospital in London, dated exactly 7 years ago. Her eyes scanned the text, automatically searching for familiar data points. The father's name was printed in clear, stark black ink, David Vance. Her husband, Chloe's breath hitched, a sharp prickle of confusion rising in her throat. They had been married for 8 years. 7 years ago, they were living in their first apartment, struggling to pay off student loans while David climbed the corporate ladder. She looked down at the mother's name, expecting a stranger, a past mistake, an old flame he had never mentioned. The name printed on the line was Sarah Linwood, her own biological sister. The room went entirely, violently cold. The blood rushed out of Chloe's face so fast her vision blurred at the edges. Sarah, the free-spirited, artistic younger sister who had tragically passed away in a head-on car accident 6 years ago. The sister whose sudden death had broken Chloe so completely that she had spent a year in a fog of grief, a period during which David had been her absolute rock, putting her back together piece by piece with endless patience. Chloe sat flat on the hard closet floor, the air completely sucked from her lungs. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. The shock was too dense, too heavy to allow for tears. She just stared at the neat, black ink of her husband's signature on a document that violated every boundary of reality she knew. Her mind frantically began to track backward, putting the timeline on an invisible chalkboard and forcing the pieces to fit. 7 years ago, Sarah had abruptly packed her bags and moved across the Atlantic, claiming she had been accepted into a prestigious master's program in London. Chloe remembered the tearful goodbye at the airport, the weekly FaceTime calls where Sarah always seemed slightly distracted, sitting in dimly lit rooms, wearing oversized sweaters. Chloe closed her eyes as a memory hit her like a physical blow. 6.5 years ago, David had gently suggested they fly out to surprise Sarah for her birthday. He had handled all the booking, but 48 hours before their flight, Sarah had called, frantically weeping, claiming she was completely overwhelmed with finals and a massive thesis deadline. She had begged them not to come, saying the pressure of hosting them would break her. Chloe had agreed, feeling guilty for stressing her little sister out. David had comforted Chloe, holding her tight on the couch, telling her they would see Sarah soon. It hadn't been an exam deadline, it had been a delivery room. The deception didn't just twist the past, it entirely erased the foundation of her marriage. Every memory of David holding her while she wept for Sarah, every anniversary they had celebrated, every quiet morning they had shared drinking coffee in the kitchen. It was all built on top of a massive, hollow lie. The man she shared a bed with, the man she trusted with her life, had fathered a child with her own sister while wearing his wedding ring. She looked back down at the golden signet ring in the box. She realized now it wasn't a fashion statement. It was a family heirloom meant for a son. The house around her was completely silent, save for the distant hum of traffic outside. Downstairs, the grandfather clock ticked with a heavy, rhythmic thud that sounded exactly like a countdown. David would be home from his golf game in less than 40 minutes. He would walk through the front door, kick off his shoes, kiss her cheek, and ask what she wanted for dinner, entirely unaware that the carefully constructed fortress of his secrets had just developed a fatal crack. Chloe carefully refolded the yellowed certificate, placing it back into the velvet box, exactly as she had found it. She set the box inside the recess, slid the wooden panel back into place, and ran her fingers along the edge to ensure the thin layer of dust looked undisturbed. She stood up, smoothed down her jeans, and walked out of the closet. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. The crying would happen later. The devastation would have its time. Right now, she needed to look at his face when he walked through that door, and she needed to make sure he didn't see a single thing changing in her eyes. The next 3 weeks became a masterclass in silent surveillance. Chloe moved through the house like a ghost, her face a perfectly calibrated mask of marital normalcy, while her mind ran like a cold, calculating machine beneath the surface. When David came home that first evening, smelling of fresh grass and expensive cedarwood, she managed to smile, to ask about his golf game, and to let his lips brush her cheek. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but she knew that a man who could harbor a secret this massive would have an armored defense, ready for any direct accusation. If she confronted him with nothing but a birth certificate, he would find a way to twist it, to lie, or to flee. To destroy him completely, she needed the entire picture. She began her hunt in the dead of night. Every evening, she waited until David's breathing grew heavy and rhythmic, signaling he was deep asleep. With her heart hammering violently against her ribs, she would softly slide his phone off the nightstand. Using his thumbprint while he slept, she bypassed his security. She didn't bother looking for text messages or recent calls. A man this meticulous wouldn't leave a sloppy digital trail. Instead, she opened his private banking applications, navigating deep into his encrypted folders, and deleted transaction histories. By the fourth night, she found the financial thread that pulled the entire tapestry apart. Every single month for the last 6 years, a substantial, untraceable wire transfer of $5,000 was made from David's secondary corporate account to a private trust fund based in London. The trustee listed on the account was an elderly woman named Margaret Vance, David's distant aunt, who lived in a quiet suburb just outside the UK capital. But it was the beneficiary line that made Chloe's breath catch in her throat. The money was dedicated entirely to a child, a boy named Leo. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The child was alive. When Sarah had died in that horrific car accident 6 years ago, the authorities had told Chloe that her sister was driving alone on a rainy evening. No one had ever mentioned a baby. Chloe painfully remembered how David had immediately volunteered to fly to London alone, to handle the funeral arrangements, to cremate Sarah's body, and to pack up her flat. Chloe had been too heavily medicated by grief and entirely shattered to leave her bed. She had stayed behind, thinking her husband was being an angel, shielding her from the brutal reality of death. In truth, he had gone to London to hide his son. He had used her grief as a smoke screen to bury the evidence of his double life. But as Chloe dug deeper into the financial records over the next 2 weeks, the story shifted from a past betrayal into an active, unfolding threat. She began analyzing the corporate tax documents David brought home in his briefcase, taking photos of them while he showered. She noticed a pattern of systematic asset draining. Over the last 12 months, David had been quietly dissolving their joint investment portfolios and shifting huge blocks of capital into an offshore holding company that Chloe had no legal access to. He was liquidating his domestic assets, slowly stripping her of the wealth they had built together. On the 16th day, she found the definitive piece of the puzzle. A digital confirmation for a one-way flight to London Heathrow, booked for the day after their upcoming 8th wedding anniversary. Attached to the itinerary was a digital deed for a newly purchased townhouse in Chelsea, registered under David's name, and a new corporate entity. He wasn't just hiding a tragic past, he was actively planning his exit strategy. He was going to abandon her. He was waiting until their anniversary, likely intending to give her a fabricated excuse about an urgent international business trip, only to vanish into the life he had been building in the shadows for nearly a decade. He was going to leave her emotionally ruined and financially bankrupt, taking his hidden son and the remnants of her family's legacy with him. Chloe didn't break down. She sat at her kitchen island in the quiet afternoon light, staring at the screen of her burner phone, where she had compiled all the screenshots, dates, and banking routing numbers. The pain of the betrayal had passed, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard clarity. She called her personal attorney. Not a standard divorce lawyer, but a high-stakes forensic asset specialist she had retained in secret. She transmitted the entire digital file to his secure server. She gave him explicit instructions. Trace every dollar, file the emergency injunctions to freeze the domestic corporate accounts, and prepare the paperwork to seize his passport. She wanted the trap completely laid, the steel jaws open and waiting, before David even realized she knew his name. For 21 days, she had played the part of the oblivious, grieving wife. She had cooked his dinners, laughed at his jokes, and watched him pack his bags for a future she was about to erase. He believed he was the architect of a perfect escape, completely unaware that he was walking straight into an execution. The private dining room at the Obsidian was suffocatingly quiet, despite the soft jazz drifting from the main restaurant. Chloe sat across from David, watching him pull at his silk tie with the easy confidence of a man who believed he owned the world. The table was draped in white linen, illuminated by the flickering warmth of a single candle. It was their 8th wedding anniversary, and David had gone all out. He had booked the exact room where they had their very first date, a grand gesture meant to serve as the perfect romantic curtain call before his planned disappearance. To 8 incredible years, Chloe, David said, raising his crystal glass of vintage champagne. His smile was flawless, the dimple on his left cheek catching the light. And to the next chapter of our lives. I know things have been chaotic with my upcoming London business trip, but tonight is about us. Chloe raised her glass, her hand completely steady. She let the rim touch her lips but didn't drink. To the next chapter, she murmured, her voice smooth, entirely devoid of the trembling rage that had fueled her for the last 21 days, and to finally clearing away the secrets. David laughed, a rich, dismissive sound. Secrets? You know everything about me, honey. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid a small velvet box across the table. Happy anniversary, open it. Chloe didn't reach for the box. She knew what was inside, a diamond tennis bracelet, a beautiful distraction purchased with money he hadn't yet managed to skim into his offshore account. Instead, she leaned back, folding her hands neatly in her lap. I brought something for you too, she said softly. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. She placed it exactly in the center of the table, covering the velvet box. David frowned, his smile faltering just a fraction at the lack of romantic flair. What's this, a trip, a legal document for the new property? He asked, trying to maintain his playful tone, though his eyes narrowed. Open it, Chloe replied, mimicking his earlier words. Her tone was deadpan, her posture regal. David broke the wax seal and pulled out the contents. The first page was a certified copy of Leo's London birth certificate, his own signature highlighted in neon yellow. Beneath it lay 6 years of meticulously tracked bank statements detailing the $5,000 monthly transfers to his aunt's UK trust fund. And, beneath that were the flight confirmations for his one-way ticket to Heathrow. Alongside the deed to the Chelsea townhouse, the transformation on David's face was instantaneous and absolute. The blood drained from his skin, leaving him a sickening, hollow shade of gray. The effortless confidence evaporated, replaced by a raw primal panic. His hands, usually so rock solid, began to shake so violently that the papers rustled against the linen tablecloth. Chloe, This isn't what it looks like, he stammered, his voice dropping an octave, cracking under the weight of the evidence. Sarah and it was a mistake, a long time ago. I was trying to protect you. After she passed, I couldn't just abandon the boy. I was going to tell you. You were going to tell me tomorrow, right before you boarded a one-way flight. Chloe interrupted. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't cry. Her calmness was the most terrifying thing in the room. You were going to leave me emotionally ruined and financially bankrupt, taking my sister's child and my family's remaining legacy with you. Chloe, please, let's talk about this privately. David hissed, looking frantically toward the frosted glass doors of the private room, terrified a waiter might walk in. Oh, we aren't private, David, Chloe said, a faint, icy smile touching her lips. Look behind you. Through the frosted glass, the silhouettes of 3 figures appeared. The door opened, and Chloe's forensic attorney walked in, accompanied by 2 private investigators and David's own chief financial officer from his firm. David surged out of his chair, but his knees seemed to buckle. "What is this? This is the end of your design," Chloe said, standing up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from her deep burgundy dress. "While you were busy planning your grand escape, my legal team filed an emergency injunction in federal court. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, every single one of your personal and corporate bank accounts has been frozen. Your offshore assets in the Cayman entity have been flagged for corporate fraud. And your passport? It's already been flagged by border control. You aren't flying anywhere tomorrow, David." David gasped for air, turning to his CFO. "Marcus, tell me this is a joke." The CFO refused to look him in the eye. "The board has already called an emergency meeting, David. The forensic trail she provided shows clear embezzlement of marital and corporate funds. You're out." David turned back to Chloe, his face twisted in a mixture of horror and desperation. He dropped back into his chair, looking incredibly small beneath the high ceilings of the restaurant. "Chloe, please. I loved her. I love Leo. I didn't want to hurt you." Chloe walked around the table, stopping just inches from him. She looked down at the man she had trusted for a decade, feeling nothing but a profound, freezing clarity. "You didn't just betray me with my sister, David. You used my grief as a weapon to hide your son. You stole her truth, and you tried to steal my future." She picked up her handbag, leaving the diamond bracelet and the manila envelope on the table. "The divorce papers are on the bottom of that stack. Sign them, or don't. The court will take everything either way." She leaned in closer, her voice a razor-sharp whisper. "By tomorrow morning, the press, your clients, and everyone who matters will know exactly what you did. You didn't build a new life, David. You just built your own prison." Without waiting for a response, Chloe turned and walked out of the private dining room. Her heels clicked with sharp, rhythmic finality against the marble floor of the restaurant. Behind her, there was no shouting, no footsteps chasing after her. Only the suffocating silence of a man sitting alone in the ruins of his double life, entirely crushed by the weight of his own calculated betrayal.